Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying Nahum, the prophet Nahum, chapter 3. That's Perek Gimel. And this is Saul Weiner, the host for your podcast. With today's chapter, we're going to complete this short book of Nahum. And he's going to continue on the theme of the destruction of the city of Nineveh. In the last chapter, God just told us that the reason why they are going to be destroyed is because of all of the oppression and slaughter that they committed against the surrounding nations as they went conquering and building their empire, and how they took all the wealth and drained the wealth from the other countries, and that's how they enriched themselves. Now, in this chapter, we are going to continue to identify what the depth of the corruption of Nineveh and the reason for their destruction, and also Nahum will describe in very graphic terms the ultimate punishment and destruction that's going to come upon the people of Nineveh and the nation of Assyria, of Ashur. So let's start with verse 1. Hoy ir damim. Hoy is an exclamation of woe, or woe, or oh. Ir damim. This is a city of blood. Now, if you recall, we've had this term come up many times in many of the prophets. This means a city where people take advantage of each other, where people fight with each other, argue with each other, take each other's things, are jealous of each other, and so on. That is an Ir Damim. Kula Kachash. It is a city that is full of lying, people lying to each other. Perek Milea. Perek is translated as by Rashi and the Radak and other commentaries as stolen goods, things that people are mifarek, they remove from others. Perek milea, full of stealing and thievery. Lo yamish taref. It doesn't stop this one person tearing up the other person, killing the other person. It just doesn't stop. So Nahum in this chapter, in the first verse that we just read, is continuing on the theme of before, but before he was talking about the oppression and perpetration of violence of Assyria against its enemies, the other nations. But once one starts to treat one's enemies that way, it's not long until that same type of treatment of one person against each other within the city, within the nation, starts happening. Once you're corrupt, the corruption starts to spread not only against other nations, but within the nation itself. And that's what Nahum is representing here, that what we described last time is now occurring within the city itself. These next few verses are described by many of the commentaries as references to the destruction of Nineveh. I don't believe that's the case. I'm going to read these verses as if they're a description of Nineveh when it is at its height of oppression of others. So what we're going to be reading here then is a description of what Nineveh was like, what the Assyrians were like when they're waging their wars against others. Kol shot v'kol ra'ash ofan. You're hearing the crack of the whips and the sound, the loud, noisy sound of the wheels running against the ground, the rumbling of the chariots, v'sus doher, the galloping of the horses, umerkava merakeda, and the dancing and jumping of the chariots as they charge forward against the enemy. Porosh ma'aleh, the horsemen get up on their horses and ride. V'lahav cherev, and the swords are shining. Uberak chanis, and the flashing of the spears. V'rov chalol v'koved pager, and all of this causes so many deaths and such a large number, incredibly large number of corpses. V'ein ketzelag via, there is no measurement of the number of bodies that v'chashlu b'gvia some, that people are tripping over bodies they are strewn about so much. This is a description. Personally, I believe this is a description of the type of destruction that is being wrought by the Assyrians upon the others. Merov zinunei zona, because of this type of behavior, of how they treated their enemies. Because of zinunei zona. Zona usually means a harlot, but here it means the unfaithfulness of the Assyrian people, who were and as we described before, who would conquer by making pretend they were friends, by signing treaties, and then attacking, and then, so to speak, cheating on the people that were relying on them. So tovat chen ba'alat kishofim, the tovat chen means the graceful, good appearance that a ba'alat kishofim, that a master of witchcraft and sorcery puts forth. They lured them in with a friendly face, a nice face. Yes, we're going to be your friends. That's tovat chen, like a sorcerer does. However, hamocheres goyim biznuna, but then she would sell away and betray those nations with her unfaithfulness, umishpachos, and families b'chshafeha, with her sorcery. The image of a sorcerer who comes and lures you in with a nice face, but then the next thing you know, he or she traps you in their claws and takes advantage of you. This is a description of Nahum, of the behavior of Assyria. This is why I believe those previous verses were referring to the behavior of the Assyrians towards others. And then God says in verse 5, Hineni elayich, therefore I am going to treat you, I am going to deal with you. Noam Adonai Tzvaot, so says God. How am I going to do this? By revealing who you really are. I am going to show the world what you really are, that you really are people that are so full of kachash, of lies, so full of thievery, so full of violence, that no one should trust you. And the image is of stripping the clothing off of the harlot to reveal her nakedness. I'm going to show them, and I'm going to show all of the nations what you are like on the inside. And I am going to show your shame and embarrassment to all of the other kingdoms, those that you took advantage of. And what else am I going to do? God says, and this gets very graphic here, and I'm going to send upon you disgusting punishments, and you are going to become grotesque, v'samtich kiroi, and you're going to be like roi. Means something that people look at and say, oh my gosh, like this is like a spectacle, is one way I've seen it translated. However, the Radak translates roi, which we find roi also refers to fecal matter. So you're going to be turned into dung. That's what you're going to be like and treated like. You're going to be so disgusting, this is verse 7, that whoever sees you is going to be reviled from you. They're going to turn away and it's going to be disgusted. They're going to say Nineveh has been plundered. Who could ever give her comfort? From where can I even look for menachamimlach, the people that want to give you comfort? In other words, you've created so much animosity against yourselves that nobody in the world is going to care when you're destroyed. Amon. What do you think? God says. This is, remember, still God speaking through his prophet. Do you think you're any better than No Amon? In other words, he's saying to the people of Nineveh, why do you think you're so powerful? Why do you think you're so great and that you're not going to suffer God's wrath? Remember how Nahum started in the first chapter by saying that the big mistake was that the people of Nineveh thought that since they escaped punishment last time, that they were immune. They can do whatever they want. They can be as powerful as they want. They can oppress whoever they want. They can kill whoever they want because they're immune. And now God says, but why do you think that? Let's go look at these other nations that were either just as powerful or more powerful or had even better military assets than you had, and they suffered destruction. So why do you think you're any different? And God says, he first points to No Amon, which is a city in Egypt, Hayoshua Bayorim, which sits by the Nile, which is a huge source of strength, source of water, and Mayim Savivlo, surrounded by water. How could it be very difficult to attack, to overcome, because it's surrounded by water? Ashechel Yam, the army of the sea, which could mean they had ships, but more likely it means the sea itself was the army. In other words, because the sea itself was protecting. Miyam Chomasa, its wall was built by the sea itself. And Kush Otzma, and there was the powerful nation of Kush, which is translated usually as Ethiopia, but certainly somewhere in that region south of Egypt, this large, strong nation, Mitzrayim, and the Egyptians, V'ein Ketza, that were there were so many of them, who Put v'Luvim, and the people of Put and Luvim. Luvim is generally translated as the Libyans. Put is some other African nation. Hayu be'ezrosech, they helped you. And I'm translating Hayu be'ezrosech, meaning they were there to help you, meaning No Amon, meaning the city of Egypt. The city of No Amon was, number one, surrounded by rivers and water. Number two, it had the help of all of these other powerful nations and people, but they still fell. Hayu be'ezrosech, by many of the commentaries, is translated as all of these nations were there to help you, meaning you, the Assyrians. But it doesn't fit that well with the context here. Hayu be'ezrosech would mean, let's look at No Amon, which is sitting among the rivers, and it is so secure, and it has all of these powerful allies. But nonetheless, in verse 10, and Gamhi, she still, meaning No Amon, still Lagolah holcha bashevi. She still went into captivity. She still went into exile. Gam ololeha yiruchu berosh kol chutzos. Even her children. Now, ololeha means children or babies, but it also, ololeha is referring to the children of Egypt, meaning the people of Egypt were crushed against the outside in the streets and killed by the onslaught of an invading army. V'al nichbadeha yadu gorol, and her leaders and her honored people were cast lots over them to be sent into slavery. V'chol gidoleh rutku bazikim, and all of her great leaders were bound in chains and brought to slavery. So why that happened to them despite their power and strength? So why do you, Assyria, think you're so great? You're not the only powerful empire. It's natural for the prophet to then look at the other powerful empire that existed, which was Egypt, and say, look, Egypt was just as powerful, or even more powerful, but they suffered a downfall too. So therefore, verse 11, Gam at tishkari, also you, he now looks at the people of Assyria and says, you also will be drunk, meaning you're going to lose the ability to think straight. You'll lose the ability to fight. You'll lose the ability to defend yourselves. Tihi na'alama, and you will be crushed, or na'alama would be forgotten. I'd like to use here in verse 11 the translation of the Even Ezra here. Na'alama, you will be forgotten. You will be so crushed that no one will even remember who you are. Gam at tivakshi ma'oz me'oyev, and you're going to start begging the enemy to protect you. You're going to ask to take me as a slave. Take me away and protect me. Just don't kill me. That's how bad you're going to be crushed. Kol mivtzarayach, your big, this is verse 12, your big fortresses, all of them, te'enim im bikurim, they're going to become weak. They're not going to provide protection. Just like a fig tree with ripe figs, that all you do is shake the tree and all the figs fall out. That's how weak. All you need to do is shake the tree and all the food falls. Same thing though, the fortresses you built to protect you, shake them a little and all the people will run out. Hine, and this is verse 13, Hine amech noshim bikirbech, behold your nation. Now, some of the commentaries translate this, your nation is weak like women among you. Because women are generally not considered warriors, and this would be a way for the prophet to say that the people and the defenders will be weak. I don't believe that's the proper translation. I think the proper translation is as follows: Hine amech noshim bikirbech, behold your nation, the women among you, le'oivayech, will be to your enemies. In other words, your nation and the women, those that aren't fighting the wars, will end up becoming captives to the enemy. Patoach niftechu, and if you read the rest of the context of this verse 13, you'll see why I translated it that way. Ki patoach niftechu sha'arei artzech. The gates to your land have been opened. In other words, the people have been chased out, and now they are given over to the enemy. And achla eish birichayech, and fire has consumed the bars of the gate. Those are the metal things that fasten the the doors in place, the fires have consumed them, the gates are open, the people are now captured and gone. Mei matzor sha'avilach. Go ahead. This is verse 14. Go ahead, draw the waters of siege, meaning before and as a siege is coming, the city will get ready. And one of the main ways is collecting as much water within the walls as possible to survive as long as possible. Draw as much water as you want. Chazkim mitzorech. Go ahead and strengthen the walls of your fortresses. Bo'i batit v'rim sibach omer. Go ahead and go into the mud and make and mix the clay and mix everything to strengthen the walls and make it hachaziki malbein. Go ahead and strengthen the bricks. Do whatever you want to prepare for the siege. But however, verse 15, sham toch lech, within that walls that you made, you're going to be burned by flames no matter what you do to prepare. Tachrisei chereb, you'll be cut down by sword. Toch lech kayolek, you will be eaten like the yolek, which is a parasitic insect of some sort, or a worm that just destroys all of the crops in a field, and the image of all of the crops just being eaten up, that's what's going to happen to you. And then his kabed kayelek. Now his kabed, there's several translations for this, but I'm going to go with several of the commentaries explain his kabed here means from the language of lechabed, to clean out. So you will be cleaned out like this insect, his kabdi ka'arbe, and you will be swept out of the city like locusts. If you imagine the image of hundreds of thousands of millions of locusts covering a field, and then suddenly the next day they all pick up and fly away. That's the image that's being portrayed here. Your people are all covering, there's so many thousands and thousands of people occupying the city, and then all of a sudden the war comes and everybody runs and everybody's gone. Here, Beis Rochlayech, you had so many businessmen, wealthy traders, Mikoch v'Hashemayim, even more than the stars in the heaven. Obviously, that's metaphorical. However, but you had so many businessmen. Everyone was getting rich on all of your plunder. However, Yelek Pashat Vaya'of. All of a sudden, the Yelek, the parasites came. The bugs came, Vaya'of, and then all of a sudden they all flew away. When they got attacked, and then all of the people just flew away, just like those locusts flew away. Min zorayich ka'arbeh, your leaders, this is just the image of everyone fleeing the city to avoid the destruction. Min zorayich, the Radak explains this from the language of Nezer, which means a crown. Those of you that were crowned, in other words, your leaders, your nobles, they flew away like locusts fly away. V'tafsirayich kegov govoy. And your tafsirayach, which means also your leaders, your officers, kigov govai, flew away like another. Gov govai is another word for locust. Hachonim bagdeiros biom kara. What happens? What do the locusts do? On a cold day, they all gather together within the cracks of the walls, and they all gather together in the rocks to stay warm against each other. But all of a sudden, shemesh zarcha, the sun comes up, vinodad, and they fly away. And nobody even knows where they went. That's what's going to happen to all of the leaders. One day they're all gathering in the city, planning, thinking, doing, and then the next day the enemy comes and poof, they all run. They're all gone. Namu ro'echa melech Ashur. King of Assyria, I'm telling you, your shepherds, in other words, those people that were in charge, your officers, your leaders, your captains, they were in charge of shepherding your sheep and keeping your people safe and together. They have fallen asleep. Yishkenu adirecha, your powerful soldiers, they fell asleep at the wheel, so to speak. Nafoshu amcha, your nation has scattered al heharim throughout the mountains. They have all run. Ve'ein mikabetz, and there's no shepherd to collect them. The image of a flock of sheep that's just scattered to the four corners of the earth, and the shepherd was asleep, and the people are gone. In kehel l'shivrecha, there is no way to heal, there is no way to fix your broken wounds and your broken bones. Nachla makosecha, your your wounds, your makos, are nachla. They became from a language of chola, of sick. They've become so sick, they've become infected. Your wounds have become infected. Kol shom eishim acha. Whoever hears news about you, taku chafalacha. This is probably the most tragic from the perspective of Nineveh. Nobody cares. Whoever hears the news, they celebrate. They clap their hands. They clap their hands in celebration. Yea, the oppressor, the terrible nation is gone. Ki al mi lo avrora aschatamid. Because whom have you not oppressed constantly? There's not a nation in the world that you didn't make into an enemy. There's not a nation that you haven't oppressed, not a nation that you haven't tortured, not a nation that you haven't conquered. So thus there will be no one left to mourn you, and no one will care. Nahum ends this way to remind us that this destruction wasn't for nothing. This destruction was for good reason, and this destruction came about as a result of the behavior of the people and the nation of Nineveh. Thank you so much for studying this book of Nahum together. Looking forward to studying the next book of the 12 minor prophets, which is the book of Habakkuk, or Habakkuk. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that in English. Habakkuk, maybe? But that's the book we'll be studying next together. Have a great day.